Coucou, bonjour, bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être venu à cette présentation. Je m'appelle Carla Tarini et je suis l'auteur d'une série de livres qui s'appelle Qui parle français. Il y a 10 livres en tout et voici la couverture du livre numéro 1. Et je suis là aujourd'hui pour vous donner des suggestions à comment utiliser cette série dans vos classes. Okay, so I'm going to switch to English. It's a little bit easier. And let me first tell you about the series. So if you aren't familiar with it, there are 10 books in the series, and each book is a little mini biography, if you will, written in the first person. And there are 10 famous and a few less famous people in each book. The people are from around the world, across the centuries, and across professions. I started writing this series, I don't know, 7 years ago or so, when I wanted my students who are 6th graders and beginners to French, I wanted to give them more repetitions on the je form. So I started writing the series, and then it morphed into a big collection with 100 people from across the French-speaking world. If you've looked at the books, you might have noticed that there are some countries that are francophone that I did not include, and I apologize for that. However, as I was working on it, I was discovering some people that I really needed to include, like Bilal, for example, and Stromae. So I had to take out a couple other people who were a little bit older to get in some younger people and some more current people. So I'm aware of that flaw, if you will, in the series, but that gives me hope that I will be able to write a couple more books to go along with it and round it out. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this presentation is talk about some pre-reading, reading, and post-reading strategies for incorporating this series into your curriculum. And then at the end, if there's time, I'll just also throw out a few ideas that didn't quite fit into those 3 categories. Okay, so as I mentioned, we'll start with some of the preview activities. I teach 6th grade French, and I only teach 6th grade French. So I haven't personally used these books with older students or more advanced students. However, when I wrote them, I very much had in mind more advanced older students, high school students, even college students, or independent learners, adults who have maybe studied French in the past and just are looking for ways to keep it up and learn something new. So I had that all in mind as I was writing it, even though it's written in the first person, in the present tense, basically with tons of cognates and very high frequency verbs. So even though it's written at a simple level, if you will, like advanced beginner level, it is designed to have depth in the content so that it can be used at multiple levels. But since I only teach 6th grade, I'm going to give you mostly ideas for introducing it in the lower levels, and you can adapt them up as necessary for your curriculum and your students. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to mention was TPR. And if you don't use TPR in your classroom or don't use it a lot, I highly encourage you to go back to go back to that practice. It's really wonderful for getting vocabulary into students' ears and into their bodies. And doing TPR in the class helps create a wonderful dynamic in the classroom because students are up and moving about. So as you remember with TPR, you're giving commands, although I do use the indicative, but you're telling your students what to do, how to do it quickly, slowly, romantically, enthusiastically, and something I do is I tell them where to do it. So, and this is a twist that I think is really useful in terms of introducing places from this series. So, places from across la francophonie is I do this thing called I put place pictures up around my room. So, for example, if I'm using book one, um, I have Django Reinhardt, who was born in Belgium, Christian Carambeu, who was born in Nouvelle-Calédonie, and Marie Curie, she was born in Poland, but I'm going to put France as my place name. So I put those three place names in three spots in my room. And it would be good to have a map also there, like a large, at least 8.5 by 11 map. So if they're standing by that place, they can look up and get familiar with what the shape of that country is or where it is. And then I would have my students, go to, classe. La classe va en Nouvelle-Calédonie. La classe joue au foot en Nouvelle-Calédonie. La classe joue de la guitare en Belgique. And so you're having them move around the room and you're giving them commands. Or again, I use the indicative to do that. So you're sort of previewing the places from the book and the activities that are going to come up in, let's say, book one. If you're familiar with Three Ring Circus, which I believe Bertie Siegel introduced decades ago, Three Ring Circus is an extension of TPR, if you sort of, maybe not, maybe I shouldn't say that. But it's good to go after you've done some TPR. So in Three Ring Circus, you have three students stand up and you give them each an action to do. So thinking that I'm previewing book one, and I know I have someone playing guitar and someone doing some research and someone playing soccer, I'm going to have my students, one student will be, I don't know, looking into a microscope. She can be doing that as to imitate Marie Curie. Another person sort of, I'll give them either a tiny soccer ball or a real one, and I'll just have them kind of play with it a little bit with their feet. And then I'll give someone like a toy guitar, if I have one, or of course they can play air guitar. And I will, again, using those place pictures that I just talked about, I'll have those three students stand underneath that place. And then while they are doing that repeated action over and over again, I will ask the rest of my class questions about who's doing what and where. And so this is a lot of great CI input. But it can also be a little bit overwhelming for your students who are sitting there to be watching their classmates. Sometimes it gets kind of funny and silly and lively. But sometimes it's just too much because I'm asking them to be, looking around and listening and processing, and then, giving me answers, one-word answers. So I do a twist on that. I call it stick figure Three Ring Circus. And on the board, I would just project those three people in three places. So let me screen share with you. This would kind of look like this. Okay. Sorry, this is, okay. So I am not an artist at all, but it's good enough for my purposes. Okay. So I would draw on the board, or I would just use these. I use these kind of cards a lot um, with this series. Um, and so I would just ask the same kind of questions as I would in a normal 3-ring circus, but without the students actually doing the actions. Um, Où est Marie? Oui, classe, Marie est en France. Classe, Marie joue de la guitare? Non, Marie ne joue pas de guitare. Qui joue de la guitare? Oh, Django joue de la guitare. Classe, Django joue en Nouvelle-Calédonie ou en Belgique? Okay, so I'm peppering them with those same 3-ring circus questions, but it's a little more low key. This could be a good way to introduce the real 3-ring circus. You know, you would start with this one day, and the next day choosing 3 different people from the book, or at least 3 different activities and 3 different, or actions, let's say, and 3 different locations from the book. Then you would have your students do the 3-ring circus after they've been prepped for it with the stick figure version. Okay. Okay, so these books have been beautifully illustrated by Esther Rosier. She's a Dutch illustrator. And in some cases, the pictures are renderings of images from the public domain. And in other cases, I gave some instructions to the illustrator of things that I wanted to include. So let me show you what I mean. So this is our picture of Léopold Sédar Senghor. Okay, and he's in a fancy office, of course. He was also, not only was he president, but he was poet. And this is a book of his poems. It says Poème de Léopold Senghor. He's got something in his hand. He's maybe a poem that he's reading, or a speech. And then also here is Poème à mon frère blanc, which is the beginning of a poem that he actually wrote. So there are, in some cases, there's a hidden things in, if you will, in the pictures that are not in the text. Okay, and that's stuff I'm going to be talking about and writing about in the teacher's guide, which I've been working hard on. So I think if you know how to do picture talk, I'm not going to give a explanation of how to do that. But I wanted to give some tweaks on picture talk. So let me think for a minute. This might not be the best one for my tweaking activity. Hang on, let me pause it and find a good one. Sorry. So picture talk, as you know, is a way of talking about a picture, providing a lot of input, using the picture to talk about yourself, asking personalized questions of your students, etc. So let's look at this picture. This is a man named Watson Meir. So you can, you know, discuss and describe what they see in this picture. And obviously I've covered something up with a little note card. You can use a sticky note so it doesn't fly away. And I do this a lot so that we can guess at what might be what's behind it, or like I'll ask my class, like, what do you think Watson does? What's his profession? And obviously he's very strong, so they might say something that has to do with sports. And then I would reveal the computer behind him. And Watson is a computer, he's an artist and he uses computer graphics to create his art. So hiding part of the picture is a nice way to do picture talk. You could also do a double picture talk, again, before you look at the text. Let's see. So there's Queen Ida. You could talk about what kind of art. You know, she's also an artist, if you will, in the large sense of the word. And what do you think she does? Compare that to Watson Mir. But pretty much you can do any kind of comparison with picture talk. Okay, so let's move on to some other previewing activities. We have beautiful maps, hand-drawn maps in this series. And map talk is a great activity. Of course, I would say that American students do not have great exposure to world geography. So this is an opportunity to support them to understand the shape of the world, if you will. And you can use these maps to do some map talk. But I know that Ben Tinsley, who has presented here at this conference, does amazing work with his map talks. So I'm just going to encourage you to watch the session that he presented here. I know that at his website, afrofranco.com, I think afrofranco.com, he has beautiful videos of him doing map talk. So I will encourage you to go ahead and do that and use map talks when you use this series. And of course, you can always there's a lot of artists in these books. You can also look up the art of Watson Mir and others. I believe there's an artist in each of the books, an artist or a sculptor or something like that. Just make sure that you preview first, because not every piece of art is going to be acceptable for your community or their age or your school. So just preview everything first. And of course, then you can also do a lot with music. There's so much to do with music. I know a lot of people do musique mercredi. One thing I like to do is just, hang on, let me pull myself back to stop screen share, sorry. Okay, I like to do brain breaks with music. And it can be as simple as playing some of the music from one of these musicians or singers and just listening to it for a minute, or having your students get up and stretch or squat. Squatting is really good for the body. I learned from a chiropractor who visited our school once. You could have them do like a little mirror, you know, one of those mirror each other games while they're listening to the music. But a game I do want to recommend to you that's a little more involved is playing a classroom version of The Voice. I do this every year, and I do it with one song every year. I only do it with Edith Piaf's Je ne regrette rien. And the reason I choose that song is because there are lots and lots of versions of people singing it, either just singing it, you know, on their YouTube channel, or you have a lot of people who've used that song to try out for various singing competitions. So here's what I do. I get 4 like those swivel chairs, and I put them in the front of my room, and I have the students face the class, and behind them is my screen. I have a TV screen kind of thing. So I project and play a, a person trying out for a competition singing Edith Piaf's song. Now, these people are from all over the world because that's such a famous song worldwide. Um, so I play the song. I've got my 4 judges who are my students um, holding a little buzzer. And if they like it, they buzz, and that's when they get to turn around and watch the rest of the um, song. Um, Now, usually I've previewed the song a little bit, maybe just played it. Never, they don't necessarily know who Edith Piaf is. It's just a song. I use maybe her original. We listen to it. I have the words, and they're familiar. They're pretty familiar with the chorus, at least. So we've gone over that, it's like a little daily warm up thing. And then, maybe the second week we play the voice. And I play it enough times so that everybody in my class has a chance to sit in the chair, be the judge, and turn around. So if you have a class of 30, it'll take longer. If you have a class of 12, you'll be done within the week. They love this and they know that chorus pretty well by the end. So maybe there's other songs um, that you can do. I just happen to know that that one works really well. And did I mention art? You could, yes, I did. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me pause for 1 second. Okay, so moving on to some of the reading activities. So again, I teach 6th grade. This is their first year French, and I want them to be able to really focus on each sentence that we're reading. So I have for years have used this technique. I call it line at a time, or LAT, line at a time. And I always type up my stories, or when I'm just writing handwritten things, I try to just write 1 sentence per line, and then I go down. Too much paragraph or a big block of text is, I find, too hard for some of them to attend to. So I support them with a line at a time style. Let me share the screen and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so again, we have Watson Mirror. And so I would project this and I would just read it. And there's lots of different ways to read a text with your students. So, je m'appelle Watson Mirror. Okay, that's kind of the title. Je m'appelle Watson Mirror. Je suis né en Floride, aux États-Unis, en Amérique du Sud. And if you want to stop after 1 sentence and just, you could do a choral translation, you could do a cognate search, class. You could also ask if you're not in Florida, if you're not teaching in Florida, was anyone born in Florida? Where were you born? Has anyone been to Florida? You can personalize each sentence and verify comprehension of each sentence, or you can stop after each one, or if your class is with you, depending on their level, you just go on. Je suis d'origine haïtienne. Qui dans la classe est d'origine haïtienne? Ah, moi je suis d'origine italienne, etc. So you can personalize. Est-ce que je parle créole et français? C'est possible. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, I had a text exchange with this artist, with Watson Mir, and I asked him if he speaks French, and he said he understands it. He understands Creole and a little French. So I didn't answer the question directly in the text on purpose, but that's his story. So c'est possible. J'habite à Philadelphie, en Pennsylvanie. So if you're not in Philadelphia where you're teaching this, then you could certainly ask who's been to Philadelphia, who's been to Pennsylvania, what's there, personalize, circle, etc. Okay. Another way, so I would maybe the first time through just kind of read it like that. Then we might do some other activities, but then I might want to go back and get sneak another reading in, if you will. And I do 2 things that I call, one is called, what do I call it? Quack read and snap read. So let's say let's start over from the beginning. So if with a snap read, I'll read the sentence, again, doing this line at a time technique, and I will snap when I want the class to read the word that I didn't say. So for example, je, and they would fill in m'appelle, and then I would say Watson-Mir. Um, je suis né, they would say en Floride. And then I might continue aux États-Unis, en Amérique, and they would say du Nord. So that's a way of getting them to read along with you, to have a little practice saying a phrase or a word or more. Um, and that's just fun. It's lively. And it's novelty, right? As Carol Gobb always said. So another single line reading is the stomp, or no, I think I said quack, whatever. You need to give them they're going to signal you in some way when you make a mistake. So where was I there? So, okay, so let's say I read the sentence and I say, je suis d'origine italienne. Well, that's not what it says. It says haïtienne. And so they will quack or stomp or clap or whistle or whatever signal you want them to do. And then I'll read it again. And I might make a different mistake or I might say it properly. So, je suis originaire d'Haïti. Well, it means the same thing, but that's not what it says. So they would stomp. Okay. And then I might say, j'aime l'Haïti. Well, that's not it at all. So you can keep, and then you finally say it the right way. So, je suis d'origine haïtienne. Do another one. Est-ce que je parle espagnol et français? They would snap or quack. Est-ce que je parle créole et français? Then I go on if they don't stop me, if I haven't made a mistake. That, they really like that one a lot. I think I mentioned it before. You can do a cognate stand, where you and the younger they are, the earlier they are in their studies, of course, the more support they need in recognizing cognates, and not everyone will recognize either one from just listening or one from reading it. So you have to kind of give them some support on that. But you can have them do a signal or stand up or wave or something when they see a cognate, and then you can talk about the cognates. Okay. There's another activity that I like, is called, I call it Remember That. And for that activity, I would project the text, read the text all the way through. Now, this is maybe a second or third time that we've read it. Then I would close the text and have students with a partner, if they can, depending on their level, write down some facts that they remember. Doesn't have to be complete sentences, may not even come out in French. They might just say, he was born in Florida, and they might write that whole thing in English. That's fine. Depends on what your expectations are and what their level is. And they try with a partner to write as many facts as they remember. And then we would read it again, and they would just check off all the facts that they got right and how many they got right. Just for fun, and it's not graded. It's not, we don't really compare which group got more. It's like, oh, great, you remember that one. Wow, I can't believe you remember that one. Perfect. And then move on. Just another way to read it again and get to know these people. One thing I forgot to mention in terms of a pre-reading activity is something that I don't know if I made it up. I don't remember hearing it from anyone, but I call it read, draw, guess. And let me stop the share for a minute. So with read, draw, guess, I will project 6 to 8 sentences. They should have some of the vocabulary from the text, but not the text itself, because it's kind of like previewing what they're going to see, and you don't want them to get anyway. Sorry. So it's just sentences. So if I know that somebody, you know, loves science, you know, then I could take a sentence, j'aime les sciences, and put that in. Someone else lives, let's see. Someone else says, I like, j'aime lire, écrire et parler. Then I take a sentence from another text. So the sentences can either be pulled, let me put it this way. Sorry. So the sentences can be pulled directly from a text, but different ones. So it's not all the same from all the same bio, let's say. Or you can just use some of the vocabulary and put it into a sentence. The key is that each sentence has to be drawable. So that's, you have to kind of think about that. So what I do is I project those 6 to 8 sentences. Then I tell my student, then we read them, make sure we understand them. And then I give them 30 seconds, and they have a whiteboard and a marker, and I put them into pairs, and they have to pick a sentence, draw it, and when the timer buzzes at 30 seconds, they absolutely have to stop. They are not allowed to make any single mark left after that. So they would draw the sentence. So let me screen share here. So let's say, where is it? Let's say the sentence is, j'aime lire et écrire. Okay, I say 1, 2, 3, allez. And then my students are going to draw someone, you know, with the book, and maybe with the piece of paper. Okay, boom, 30 seconds, it's done. Their partner then looks at their picture, reads through the sentences, and picks out the one closest to this, or the one that best fits it. Okay. Sometimes I do purposefully put sentences that have some of the same verbs in them. Like I might have this one, j'aime lire et écrire, and another one might be, j'écris un livre de sport, or something like that. So they have to guess the right one. So what's happening here is that it's fun. These are simple stick figure drawings. So hopefully the affective filter is low. My students know that I can't draw, so and they know it's just to communicate an idea. They are rereading, and they're looking at each other. They're working together. It's not so teacher fronted. And it's very light. The timing element for most of my students is pretty fun. It's a quick, it's not really a competition, it's a game that's energizing. So that's a fun thing. I call it read, draw, guess. Okay, so some post-reading activities. Let's see, did we do all of those? Okay, so some post-reading activities. One of the most natural things, I think, is to compare people in the, like we talked about earlier, comparing the pictures, in this case, then comparing the bios. And one really easy way to do that, of course, is with the Venn diagram. And I would start, I would do this on the board or on the, project it, and pick 2 people and let your class choose, and then do the comparison. And then I suggest also then doing write and discuss. And if you're not familiar with the write and discuss technique, it's another really great technique. You can Google that for really good description of how to do that. I know Mike Pito is wonderful, has some wonderful videos on doing write and discuss. But essentially, you will guide the students in writing, like writing up the Venn diagram, for example. So you can ask them to say the sentences as you write them down, and of course you would edit them as you write it. Or you can start a sentence and they can finish it depending on what their language is at. Um, and then you can also use write and discuss. It's a great way to do a little pop-up grammar and have them take notice of little verb endings or agreement things and stuff like that. But one of the reasons I wrote this series was to have students um, not only just be aware of these people across the French speaking world, but also make personal connections. So once you've done a Venn diagram with two people from the book, I would certainly encourage you to have students make their own Venn diagrams with, let's say you've read book one, and each student can take some time and pick any one of the people that they want, give them some choice in the matter, and create their own Venn diagram, um, comparing and contrasting themselves to someone whose bio they preferred. And anytime we start with a graphic like a Venn diagram, basically kids are just maybe filling in a couple words and this, or phrases that they're not really writing long sentences or anything like that. And that's wonderful. If they're a little more advanced, they can take the work that they did in the Venn diagram and then build it into um, a longer written piece if they're ready for that. Um, you could do it at the end of each book. You could do it with each character, depending on how into it you are and your students are. You could have them do 3 at the end of each book. And I would, my students use a paper notebook, like a spiral notebook. And that's a nice way because then they can see over time, like the people that they picked, as opposed to doing it like on their iPads or whatever computerized devices they have. I like to use spiral notebooks or composition notebooks for that purpose. Let's see. Hang on one second. One thing I forgot to mention was movie talk or clip talk. One way I did wasn't really movie talk because I didn't describe it because I was teaching asynchronously this past year. So I had introduced several people from book one, well, from several of the books actually. And I looked for videos of them that I could link to my slideshows. And so one thing I did was to describe to my students in the asynchronous video that I was making what they were going to see in the actual video of the person. So, for example, I described in one case Celine Dion, what she was wearing, what she was doing, reminded them who she was and where she was from and all that. And then I just had a link to the 3-minute video of her singing a song. I had another like this preview of a video where I talked about Christian Carimbeau, and like what he's athletic, he likes to run, he's fast, he's a great soccer player, he doesn't play basketball, and then a little reminder of the background. And then I had them link to a video of him scoring a goal or something like that. So the more you can find videos of these people doing what they do, the better, because it brings them to life in another way that reading about them or doing a picture talk or an art talk or music talk can't. They get to actually see the person singing, dancing, scoring a goal, acting, or whatever. And of course, there's lots of movies um, uh, that these people are in. So if it's possible to show a scene from a movie and talk about that, that's another great thing to do. You can often find trailers for movies, like for the Edith Piaf movie. There's probably a trailer with Marion. What's her last name? Cotillard. Cotillard. There's probably a trailer you could show your students. Um, what else do I have for you? Uh, so for, like I said, I only teach sixth grade and I only teach beginners and I only see them for 1 year. So I don't have the joy of seeing them progress over the next few years at my middle school, because they also go to a different school. But for those of you who are teaching this with high school students or with older, I mean, not older, more, I mean, with more advanced students, um, certainly the text is going to be easy for them to read, but the ideas are complex and you're touching on, lots of, you know, um, parts of history. There are lots of social justice references and issues. There's um, women's rights, human rights, um, um, taking a knee, for example, taking a stand on historical practice, um, protecting the planet, protecting resources, child labor, all of these things are in here, anti-war, anti-colonialism, anti-occupation. So there's some heavy duty themes running through this. The younger your students are, the less of a background in history they have. So, for example, my students a few years ago didn't really know what the Holocaust was. So when we're talking about um, Marcel Marceau leading Jewish children, um, out of danger, they couldn't really wrap their heads around that until I explained a little bit. So I guess you just have to know a little bit about your students and what they know, and be prepared to explain um, some explain history to them. Um, there's also, if your school does some service projects, there are several mentions of um, organizations and foundations in in the series, and your students can maybe do some research into them. I know Dikembe Mutombo has a foundation, and let me see, what else do I have in these notes here? There's Peace and Sport, l'Organisation pour la paix et le sport, Yannick Noah, Enfant de la Terre. Sorry, I'm not looking at you, but I'm looking at my notes. Brigitte Bardot has a foundation, I think. I forget, saving animals. Kelina is Flora Coquerel's foundation. So there's probably at least a half a dozen different foundations that your students can look into and learn about, and then maybe do some fundraising for, or just get the word out, or something like that. Let's see. There's also I don't know the AP curriculum very well, but I do remember when I was working on this that I think there's a theme in the AP curriculum about aesthetics and beauty. And I purposely put in one of the books Louis XIV, his bio right before Brigitte Bardot, because in both bios they talk about how beautiful their legs are. So you could certainly look at beauty standards for men and for women, and over time there are several models and in the series, and there are also um, oh, she won the Miss France award, so there's beauty competition winner, in these books. There's also themes that have to do with racism, bullying, um, gender inequality, gender discrimination. So all of these things can be explored at a higher level with your more advanced students. Okay, and then this is something I wanted to mention before. I know some people do passwords, either to enter or to exit or both. And related to that is a call and response technique for getting students' attention. So actually, let me start with the call and response. So to get my students' attention when they first come in, or when they're getting chatty, or when they've done some pair work, or something, and I need them to focus back on what I need to say, I say class, class, and they're supposed to say in unison, oui, madame. And I teach them how to do this at the very beginning of the year. I think John Coward has some great videos on things like that, and Bryce Headstrom as well. So they know that as a focusing and attention getting technique. But you can certainly play with that once they get how it works, that call and response. And you can use some of the phrasing from these bios. So for example, like you might do one a week, depending on which book you're in. Let me see if I can pull one up. Hang on 1 second. Okay, so for example, I would say, so pretend my class is busy chatting, or just being a little noisy, or just finishing up an activity, and I want their attention. I say class, class. They say oui, madame. Then I would teach them a new one just for fun. And I know that Queen Ida in book 1 has a song in which she says, "Ooh la la, je suis comme ça." And so I might have those words on a piece of paper, or on my, hold up a little whiteboard. And then I would say, "Ooh la la," and my class would say, "Je suis comme ça." And then later, maybe by the end of the week, I might play that song for them. And then they'll have that line, and that's like a little, "Oh, madame, you planned that out for us. How fun!" Or, they love stuff like that when they realize that you've planted a seed early on, and then it comes to fruition later on. So let me see if I can find some other examples of that. Hang on 1 sec. Okay, so I found 2 more that I could use from book 1. Olympe de Gouges wrote Les droits des femmes. So again, you're getting their attention. You say classe, classe. They say oui, madame. Then you're holding up your sign. Les droits des hommes, and they say les droits des femmes. Another one is Marcel Marceau, who says, si je ne suis pas mime, je ne suis rien. Again, class, class, oui, madame. You've got their attention. You hold up the new call and response phrasing. Si je ne suis pas mime, they say je ne suis rien. And then later on, when you get to that, you front loaded that language, and they're like, "Oh, madame, that's familiar to me." So that's just a cute way to use some of the language in here in a different way. And you can also do that, like I was saying earlier, with the passwords. You would stand outside your door, or at least that's how I would do it. And I have the words. I don't have my students memorize it. They're too young, and it's too new. But I hold it up. Maybe by the end of the week, if I'm using the same password for the whole week, they might know it by the end. So I would hold it up. I point to my part. I point to their part. And sometimes I even say it in the beginning of the year. I might say it for them because they're not ready to output, but some kids are. Some kids want to try to speak right away. So you could use some of those phrases. Again, Voltaire, book 2, il faut cultiver notre jardin. In book 7, Nguyen Le says, avec ma guitare, tout est possible. Alexandre Dumas in book 9, un pour tous et tous pour un. Jean-Paul Sartre, j'écris et je résiste. And then the response is, je résiste et j'écris. You could also do it in 3. So you'd have your class divided and they would have to know what the groupings are. But Leopold Senghor from book 1 again, égalité, complémentarité and solidarité. If you wanted to use like a Jacques Brel song, I forget what book he's in, I think book 3. It's a little dark, but l'ombre de ton ombre, l'ombre de ta main, l'ombre de ton chien. So those are some ways to just incorporate the language into some of your daily routines. So I think I'm over the time. There's obviously lots and lots and lots of things you can do with these books. Our main goal is to connect these students to the whole French-speaking world, people from all over the world, make human connections, expand their understanding of where French is spoken, and enjoy learning about the world and other people across the centuries. And merci d'être venu à cette présentation. Merci tout le monde et au revoir.